What would you do if a massive 800-pound grizzly bear showed up at your doorstep, not to attack, but to beg for help? Most of us would probably run for our lives, right? But when wildlife photographer Walter Jenkins found himself face-to-face with one of nature's most feared predators at his remote cabin in the Canadian Rockies, what happened next would challenge everything we think we know about these magnificent creatures and prove that sometimes the most extraordinary bonds can form in the most unexpected ways. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming stories like this one. Picture this. It's a crisp October morning in 2023, and Walter Jenkins is 200 miles deep in the wilderness of Banff National Park. For the past 15 years, Walter has been documenting wildlife through his lens, spending months at a time in his off-grid cabin, capturing the raw beauty of creatures most people only see in documentaries. His rustic cabin sits nestled between towering pine trees, with nothing but endless wilderness stretching in every direction. Walter had chosen this isolated location specifically because of its proximity to wildlife corridors, paths that animals use to travel between feeding and nesting areas. Over the years, he'd photographed everything from majestic elk to elusive mountain lions, but grizzly bears had always been his holy grail. These apex predators are notoriously difficult to capture on camera, preferring to avoid human contact at all costs. That morning started like any other. Walter was reviewing photos from the previous day's shoot when he heard something that made his blood run cold. A deep, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of his cabin. It wasn't quite a roar, but it wasn't a growl either. It was something far more unsettling. It sounded almost pleading. When Walter peered through his cabin window, his heart nearly stopped. There, just 20 feet from his front door, stood the largest grizzly bear he'd ever seen. The massive male, later estimated to weigh over 800 pounds, had a distinctive cream-colored patch on his chest and scars across his weathered face that spoke of countless battles for survival. But here's what was truly extraordinary. The bear wasn't displaying any aggressive behavior. Instead, he was actually sitting, like an enormous dog, his massive head tilted slightly to one side. His dark eyes weren't filled with the wild fury you'd expect from such a powerful predator. Instead, they held something Walter had never seen in a wild grizzly before: vulnerability. The bear made that same pleading sound again, and Walter realized something was terribly wrong. This wasn't normal behavior for a grizzly, especially not a massive adult male during the critical pre-hibernation feeding period. Adult male grizzlies are typically solitary, aggressive, and avoid human contact at all costs. Yet here was this giant sitting outside his cabin like he was asking for something. Walter grabbed his camera with a telephoto lens and began documenting what he was witnessing. Through his viewfinder, he could see more details that made his heart sink. The bear's left front paw was held at an awkward angle, and there appeared to be something wrapped around it, something that definitely didn't belong in the wilderness. Over the next hour, Walter watched from his window as the bear remained in the same spot, occasionally letting out those heartbreaking vocalizations. It became clear that this magnificent creature wasn't just injured, he was trapped. Wrapped tightly around his left paw was what appeared to be heavy-duty fishing line or possibly thin wire, cutting deep into his flesh. The bear had somehow become entangled, and the more he'd struggled to free himself, the tighter the binding had become. Now, after what must have been days or even weeks of suffering, the proud predator had swallowed his natural fear of humans and come seeking the one thing he'd never asked for before: help. Walter faced an impossible decision. Grizzly bears, even injured ones, are incredibly dangerous. Their powerful jaws can crush a bowling ball, and their claws can slice through a car door like paper. One swipe from those massive paws could easily kill a human. Every wildlife expert, every park ranger, every survival guide would tell you the same thing. Stay inside, call for help, and wait for professionals. But as Walter watched this suffering giant, he realized something that would change both of their lives forever. The nearest wildlife authorities were at least 6 hours away by helicopter, if the weather permitted flying, which it often didn't in these mountains. By the time help arrived, this bear could be dead from infection, starvation, or sheer exhaustion. What happened next goes against every piece of conventional wisdom about human-wildlife interactions, but sometimes conventional wisdom isn't enough. Sometimes compassion has to override caution. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed absolutely insane to anyone watching. He was going to help this bear himself. But he wasn't going to be reckless about it. Marcus spent the next 2 hours carefully planning his approach. He gathered supplies, thick work gloves, wire cutters, a first aid kit, and most importantly, his camera to document everything. If this went wrong, at least there would be a record of what happened. He also prepared himself mentally for the very real possibility that this act of compassion could cost him his life. Grizzly bears, even injured ones, are incredibly dangerous. Their powerful jaws can crush a bowling ball, and their claws can slice through a car door like paper. One swipe from those massive paws could easily kill a human. But looking into those pleading eyes, Marcus knew he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try. When Marcus finally opened his cabin door, the bear's reaction was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. Instead of charging or fleeing, the two typical responses of a surprised grizzly, the bear simply watched him with what could only be described as hope. Marcus began talking to the bear in calm, soothing tones, the same way he might speak to a frightened dog. "Easy there, big guy. I see you're in trouble. I'm going to try to help, but you need to trust me, okay?" The bear's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, and incredibly, the massive predator remained seated. As Marcus slowly approached, he could see the full extent of the bear's predicament. The fishing line had cut deep grooves into the bear's paw, and the surrounding flesh was swollen and infected. The bear had been suffering for far longer than Marcus had initially thought. What happened next still gives Marcus chills when he tells the story. As he knelt down just 5 feet from the bear, the giant predator extended his injured paw towards him, actually extended it as if showing Marcus exactly where the problem was. Working with painstaking care and incredible courage, Marcus began the delicate process of freeing the bear's trapped paw. The fishing line had become so embedded in the swollen flesh that it was nearly invisible in some places. Using his wire cutters, Marcus carefully snipped away strand after strand, all while the 800-pound predator sat perfectly still. The most remarkable part: the bear seemed to understand exactly what Marcus was doing. When Marcus needed to adjust his grip or change angles, the bear would shift his paw slightly to give him better access. It was as if they were working together, predator and human, united in a common goal. The entire process took nearly an hour. Marcus's hands were shaking, both from adrenaline and from the incredible trust that was being placed on him. One wrong move, one moment of fear from either of them, and the situation could turn deadly in an instant. But as Marcus carefully removed the final strand of fishing line, something magical happened. The bear let out a deep, rumbling sound, not the pleading vocalization from before, but something that sounded almost like gratitude. Marcus didn't stop at just removing the fishing line. Using supplies from his first aid kit, he carefully cleaned the bear's wounds and applied antibiotic ointment. The bear sat patiently through the entire process, occasionally sniffing at Marcus's hands, but never showing any sign of aggression. When Marcus finally finished and stepped back, the bear looked directly at Marcus and made a sound that was unmistakably a vocalization of thanks. Then, in a gesture that defied everything we know about wild animal behavior, the bear gently touched Marcus's shoulder with his good paw, a brief, tender contact that lasted only a second, but spoke volumes about the connection that had formed between them.
You might think that would be the end of the story, a beautiful moment of connection before the bear disappeared back into the wilderness forever. But what actually happened was even more extraordinary. The bear, whom Marcus began calling Kodiak due to his massive size, didn't leave. Instead, he set up what could only be described as a temporary camp near Marcus's cabin. For the next 3 weeks, as his paw healed, Kodiak became a regular visitor. Every morning, Marcus would find the giant bear sitting in the same spot where they'd first met, as if checking in to say good morning. Marcus began documenting their interactions, capturing footage that wildlife experts initially refused to believe was real. The relationship that developed was unlike anything in recorded wildlife literature. Kodiak would watch Marcus work on his photography equipment, his intelligent eyes following every movement. When Marcus went on short hikes to photograph other wildlife, Kodiak would sometimes follow at a distance, like a massive, furry bodyguard. The most incredible moment came 2 weeks into their unusual friendship. Marcus was having trouble with a stuck shutter on his camera when Kodiak approached, and using his now-healed paw, gently nudged the camera mechanism. It wasn't random. The bear had been watching Marcus struggle with the same issue for days and somehow understood what needed to be done. When Marcus first shared his footage and photos with wildlife authorities, the reaction was predictable: disbelief, skepticism, and concern for his safety. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a leading grizzly bear expert from the University of Calgary, initially dismissed the story as impossible and irresponsible. But the evidence was undeniable. Marcus had hours of high-definition footage showing detailed interactions between himself and Kodiak. More importantly, he had documentation of the bear's injured paw, the removal of the fishing line, and the healing process that followed. When Dr. Mitchell finally viewed all the evidence, her perspective changed completely. What Marcus documented challenges our fundamental understanding of grizzly bear behavior, she admitted. This level of trust and apparent gratitude toward a human is unprecedented in wild grizzly bears. The story began attracting attention from wildlife researchers around the world. Dr. James Harrison, an animal behaviorist from Oxford University, traveled to Marcus's cabin to witness the interactions firsthand. What he saw convinced him that Kodiak represented something truly extraordinary in the world of human-wildlife relationships. So how do we explain what happened between Marcus and Kodiak? According to the experts who studied their interactions, several factors contributed to this unprecedented bond. First, Kodiak's extreme distress and pain likely overrode his natural fear of humans. When an animal is suffering enough, survival instincts can lead to behaviors that would normally never occur. Second, Marcus's calm, non-threatening approach was crucial. His years of experience photographing wildlife had taught him how to move and behave in ways that don't trigger an animal's fight or flight response. But perhaps most importantly, recent research has shown that bears are far more intelligent and emotionally complex than previously understood. They have excellent memories, can form complex social bonds, and may even be capable of gratitude, an emotion once thought to be uniquely human. Dr. Mitchell explains it this way. Kodiak understood that Marcus helped him when he was in desperate need. The bond that formed was based on trust earned through compassionate action. It's a reminder that the line between human and animal intelligence and emotion isn't as clear-cut as we once believed. The story of Marcus and Kodiak teaches us several profound lessons about wildlife, compassion, and the connections that can form across species lines. First, it challenges our preconceptions about dangerous wildlife. While grizzly bears are indeed powerful predators that must be respected, they're also intelligent, complex creatures capable of recognizing kindness and responding to it. Second, it demonstrates the power of compassionate action. Marcus could have stayed safely inside his cabin, but his decision to help a suffering creature led to one of the most documented and extraordinary human-wildlife relationships in modern history. The story also highlights the ongoing impact of human activity on wildlife. The fishing line that trapped Kodiak is just one example of how our careless actions can cause immense suffering to wild animals. Marcus now works with parks departments and environmental groups to educate visitors about the importance of leaving no trace in natural areas. Perhaps most importantly, the story has changed how many people think about predators like grizzly bears. Instead of seeing them as mindless killing machines, Marcus's experience shows them as the intelligent, complex creatures they truly are, deserving of our respect and protection. Dr. Mitchell, the bear expert who initially doubted Marcus's story, now uses their relationship as a case study in her research on bear intelligence and emotion. She explains, Marcus and Kodiak have opened new avenues of research into animal consciousness and emotional capacity. Their story is helping us understand that the gap between human and animal experience may be much smaller than we ever imagined. The impact of Marcus and Kodiak's story has spread far beyond the scientific community. The photographs and videos have gone viral multiple times on social media, reaching millions of people around the world with a message of compassion and understanding.
Wildlife rehabilitation centers report increased donations and volunteer applications following exposure to the story. Conservation groups have seen renewed interest in protecting grizzly bear habitat, and countless individuals have shared their own stories of unexpected encounters with wildlife, inspired by Marcus' example of choosing compassion over fear. One particularly touching response came from a young girl in Montana who wrote to Marcus after seeing his photos. "I used to be scared of bears," she wrote, but now I know they can be friends too. When I grow up, I want to help animals like you helped Kodiak." It's responses like these that remind Marcus why sharing his story was so important, despite the initial criticism and skepticism he faced from some quarters. As of today, Marcus has never seen Kodiak again. Grizzly bears can live up to 30 years in the wild, so it's entirely possible that his friend is still out there somewhere in the vast wilderness of the Canadian Rockies. Every spring, when Marcus returns to his cabin for another season of wildlife photography, he finds himself scanning the tree line, hoping for one more glimpse of that distinctive cream-colored chest patch. Wildlife cameras that Marcus has set up in the area have captured images of several large male grizzlies over the years, but none with Kodiak's distinctive markings. Whether he survived his hibernation that first winter, found a mate, or simply moved to a different territory remains a mystery. But in a way, that uncertainty adds to the magic of their story. Kodiak remains wild and free, exactly as he should be. The fact that he chose to trust a human in his moment of greatest need makes their brief friendship all the more precious. The story of Marcus and Kodiak offers several important lessons for all of us. Compassion knows no boundaries. When Marcus saw a suffering creature, he didn't see a dangerous predator. He saw a fellow being in need of help. That shift in perspective made all the difference. Sometimes, the right thing to do isn't the safe thing to do. Marcus took an enormous risk by approaching an injured grizzly bear, but his compassionate action likely saved Kodiak's life. Wildlife is more complex than we often realize. Kodiak's behavior challenged everything scientists thought they knew about grizzly bears, reminding us that there's still so much to learn about the natural world. Our actions have consequences. The fishing line that trapped Kodiak was a stark reminder that human carelessness can cause immense suffering to wildlife. Documentation matters. Without Marcus's careful photography and videography, this incredible story might never have been believed or shared with the world. Marcus's experience with Kodiak isn't just a heartwarming story. It's a call to action for all of us who care about wildlife and the natural world. Every year, countless animals suffer and die from human-caused injuries like the fishing line that trapped Kodiak. We can all make a difference by practicing leave no trace principles when we visit natural areas. Pack out all trash, including fishing line, and dispose of it properly. Supporting wildlife rehabilitation centers and conservation organizations that work to protect animals like grizzly bears. Educating others about the importance of wildlife conservation and the complex emotions and intelligence of animals. Being mindful of our impact on the natural world and making choices that minimize harm to wildlife. Sharing stories like Marcus and Kodiak's to help change perceptions about predators and the importance of coexistence. Today, Marcus continues his work as a wildlife photographer, but his approach has been forever changed by his encounter with Kodiak. He now focuses not just on capturing beautiful images, but on telling stories that help people understand and connect with the wildlife that shares our planet. His cabin in the Canadian Rockies has become something of a pilgrimage site for other wildlife photographers and researchers. Many come hoping to have their own extraordinary encounter, but Marcus always reminds them that what happened between him and Kodiak was unique, a perfect storm of circumstances that may never be repeated. But that doesn't mean similar connections can't be formed. Every interaction we have with wildlife, no matter how brief, is an opportunity to choose compassion over fear, understanding over prejudice, and protection over exploitation. The story of Marcus and Kodiak raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness, emotion, and connection across species. Did Kodiak really feel gratitude toward Marcus? Was their bond genuine, or are we projecting human emotions onto animal behavior? Perhaps the answer doesn't matter as much as the impact of believing it's possible. When we open our minds to the possibility that animals can feel complex emotions like gratitude, trust, and friendship, we fundamentally change how we interact with the natural world. Marcus puts it best. Whether Kodiak felt gratitude in the same way a human would is something we'll never know for certain. But I know what I felt in those moments when we connected. A sense of mutual respect and understanding that transcended species. That experience changed my life, and I believe it changed his too. As we come to the end of this extraordinary story, it's worth remembering that Marcus and Kodiak's relationship began with a simple choice: to help rather than to fear, to extend compassion rather than to retreat into safety. That same choice is available to all of us every day. We may never find ourselves face to face with an 800-pound grizzly bear, but we all encounter opportunities to show kindness to the creatures that share our world, whether it's an injured bird in our backyard, a lost pet in our neighborhood, or simply choosing products that don't contribute to wildlife habitat destruction. The bear that came begging for help at Marcus's cabin in the Canadian wilderness taught us all something profound: that the boundaries between human and animal, predator and friend, wild and tame, are more fluid than we ever imagined. In a world that often seems divided by fear and misunderstanding, the story of Marcus and Kodiak offers hope that connection and compassion can triumph over even the most unlikely odds. If this story has moved you, consider taking action to help wildlife in your own community. Volunteer at a local wildlife rehabilitation center, support conservation organizations, or simply commit to being more mindful of your impact on the natural world. Share Marcus and Kodiak's story with others and help spread the message that every creature, no matter how wild or fearsome it may seem, deserves our respect and protection. And remember, the next time you encounter an animal in need, you have a choice. You can choose fear, or you can choose compassion. You can choose to turn away, or you can choose to help. Sometimes that single choice can change not just one life, but the way we understand the entire natural world. Because in the end, that's exactly what happened when a grizzly bear came begging for help at a man's cabin in the Canadian wilderness. And what happened next was absolutely unreal. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more incredible wildlife stories. Share Marcus and Kodiak's story with anyone who believes in the power of compassion to bridge even the wildest divides. What would you have done in Marcus's situation? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from our amazing community.